Welcome back to Silicon Wafers. This is the new format on the channel, which takes a deep dive into individual news stories and seeks to provide as much information and analysis as is available on what is happening in Russia's war of aggression on Ukraine. This video will appear as a teaser on the main channel for around 48 hours or so, and then it will transition onto the second channel called Silicon Wafers. A link is contained in the description of this video. Please check it out because there are other videos there which are not available to non-members on the main channel, and we'll be adding new material on a daily basis. So in order not to miss out, please do subscribe and like to help this new format and the new channel improve in YouTube's algorithm. Today, we're going to be discussing the massive attacks on Ukraine that have been launched by Russia over the weekend. We are now into the second day of these extraordinary scale attacks, which show Putin's impotent rage and capacity for violence. Civilians have been killed and injured as Russia launches a large-scale attack on Ukraine for the second night on 27th of August 2024. The attacks began on Monday, 26th of August. According to the Ukrainian Air Force, this was possibly the largest attack on Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. Russia launched 127 projectiles and 109 drones, while Ukraine downed 102 projectiles and 99 of the drones, it is estimated by the Air Force. Russian strikes hit several civilian energy and fuel facilities, including a dam in Kyiv, part of the Kyiv Hydroelectric Power Plant. More on that aspect of the attack in just a minute. 7 people were killed and 47 were injured, according to the State Emergency Service, and this attack was spread over a huge territory, with Russian forces striking targets in at least 24 oblasts, according to Prime Minister Denys Shmyhal. Russia is using an approach that combines many types of offensive weapons, likely because that is what they have to hand, but also the mixture creates a harder task for Ukrainian air defenses. One Kinzhal ballistic, one Iskander-M KN-23 ballistic, one KH-22 cruise, 99 KR-101 Kalibr, and KH-5969 cruise, as well as 99 Shahed-type drones. You'll notice that I avoid using the M word here because there is some evidence that the algorithm does not approve of that word or the violent reality that it represents. Scanning the media reports, there is some coverage, but not nearly as much as we'd expect from such a serious event. Some commentators have also slipped into the ad hoc analysis that this attack was revenge for the Kursk incursions, but no Ukrainian analysts have expressed this view. Rather, they point out that Russia's behavior has been consistent now for 2.5 years. Where it can attack, it does. Where air defenses are shown to be weak, Russia attacks hardest. And where it can take out crucial energy and power generating infrastructure, it goes after that. The behavior has not changed, and the target has not changed. Only the intensity varies, and that is usually timed in a symbolic way after key holidays such as New Year and Ukrainian Independence Day, which has just passed on Sunday of the last weekend. Rather than revenge, this is the mindset of an abusive ex-partner that tries to exert his ownership over an abused spouse, even though he has no legal or moral right to do so. The attacks on energy infrastructure have the character of a strategy, however, and this is both to terrorize the civilian population, but also make life unbearable, or so Russia thinks. Ahead of the winter, which is soon approaching, this damage to energy infrastructure could cause genuine hardship, both for people, but also for the economy. The significance of Russia's targeting was emphasized as President Volodymyr Zelensky immediately met with Air Force Commander Mykola Oleshchuk, Interior Minister Igor Klimenko, and crucially the Energy Minister Herman Holoshenko and Volodymyr Kudrytsky, the head of state grid operator Ukrenerga. The group discussed the efficiency of air defense and electronic warfare systems and mobile fire groups in each region, amongst other issues. And of course, one of those issues was the impact of these strikes on the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. The ballistic munitions that Russia uses against the energy infrastructure have been proven to contain many American components. It's worth spending a moment to contemplate the absurdity of this. Russia, an enemy of the US and the free world, can hit Ukraine with projectiles containing parts manufactured in the US, but Ukraine is prevented from hitting military targets in Russia with American long-range munitions. The policy of striking the arrows and not the archer is very much in force, despite the strategic threat to Ukraine that these attacks represent. We must ask also how long this can be sustained, both in terms of the expensive air defense materials required and the fact that some of the Russian ordnance does actually hit the intended targets. Red lines and caution abound, while Russia has impunity for its terror. It seems that Western allies would rather risk a major humanitarian crisis this winter in Ukraine, potentially causing hundreds of thousands or even millions of refugees to flood across the border into the EU, rather than accept the imagined risks associated with allowing Ukraine to target Russian launchers with Western weapons. One of the more dramatic images to emerge from the attacks was the strike on a reservoir in the Ukrainian city of Vyshhorod, captured in footage that shows the impact, sending a spray of water into the air. A power plant was also hit by that same attack. Ukraine's Prime Minister Denys Shmyhal said energy infrastructure across Ukraine had been hit, and it's becoming clear that this was the major target of Russia's two-day and counting barrage. A few drones disappeared from location radars and were lost somewhere on Ukrainian territory. 2 unmanned aerial vehicles crossed the border with Belarus as well, it was noted. Demining operations are underway at sites affected by Russia's attacks. In some areas, Russian forces attacked civilian facilities with cluster munitions. Sappers must now check the locations before power engineers can start repairing the damage. The intense attack has prompted some Western politicians to call for a lifting of the restrictions on use of its weapons so Ukraine can defend itself. This must be the inevitable outcome of escalating Russian attacks, so why delay the decision endlessly to the point where it becomes less effective when it is eventually agreed? Let Ukraine go after the launch sites and the airfields, solve the problem at source, not merely the symptoms. Drip feeding and delay has been the characteristic behavior of Western allies throughout the war, and it's more than just complacency, inefficiency, incompetence, and bureaucratic torpor, though these are, of course, all problems too. There seems to be a deliberate policy to be predictable, signal every step, and boil the frog, as it were. It's as if the Western allies don't want to do anything that comes as a surprise to Russia, no matter what we eventually provide or in what quantities. It's as if we are afraid that Russia is on a hair trigger and any sudden movement may set them off. It is a calculated strategy by Russia, of course, over many decades to threaten and bully the West with the idea of a nuclear apocalypse, whether it comes from the Russian state directly or as a result of that state collapsing. Both are techniques to coercively control Western planners and policymakers and limit the scope of support that we provide to Ukraine. The EU's chief diplomat, Joseph Borrell, urged on August 26th to lift restrictions on Ukraine's use of Western long-range weapons to strike Russian military targets. Borrell has previously advocated lifting this ban on Ukraine, but he raised the issue again after Russia's recent attack this weekend, in which it used 127 missiles and 109 drones, as we've mentioned. This massive aerial attack launched by Russia against Ukrainian cities involved multiple explosions, which were reported right across the country. But Russia does not tend to attack Ukraine directly on national holidays, but does so after, when Ukrainian air defense is tired and perhaps, as they think, off their guard. Also, attacking on Mondays is a common pattern because the psychological impact is greater at the start of the week. And of course, back to the topic of the energy facilities that were attacked by Russia that we mentioned at the start of this episode. One major target seems to have been the energy facilities of the Kyiv Hydroelectric Power Station, which is located near the city of Vyshhorod. One rocket missed the target and fell into the water, which led to incredible footage mentioned earlier. But other ballistic projectiles were aimed towards it, not just the Shaheeds that are too small to do any impactful damage to the structure. Of course, interrupting the energy generating capacity is a key target, but we have to ask, do the Russians also believe they can cause structural damage to the dam as well? Might they dream of causing another humanitarian and environmental catastrophe north of Kyiv, the consequences of which could be severe and highly unpredictable? It's unlikely that even with ballistic projectiles, they could cause a collapse of such a substantial structure. But this is Russia. If we let them, they will try. If they could cause a wave of dirty water to disrupt industry and civic infrastructure in the Kyiv Oblast, flooding thousands of homes and factories, then they surely would. Russia is only restricted by its capacity to do evil. It is not limited by any moral or humanitarian concerns. It's only Ukrainian will and force of arms that foils Russia's attacks and holds them at bay. Later in the day, on August 26th, Timofey Milofanov, an advisor to Zelensky's office, confirmed that a dam in Kiev, part of the Kyiv Hydroelectric Plant, had indeed been hit during the attack. It's not random, of course, and Russia has a history of trying to create ecocide terror events as part of its war strategy. We saw this unfold on a terrible scale in the attack on the Kakhovka Dam last year. This makes it even more imperative for the West to lift red lines that appease the Kremlin regime and create a safe space for Russian murder and mayhem on the territory of Ukraine. Western allies are playing with fire with all of these limitations and cautions, emboldening Russia to ever more brutal acts, enabling their terrorism and giving Putin the illusion that he can still win the war. We exude weakness and timidity, which is a red rag to the Kremlin bull. And ultimately, by giving out signals that Putin interprets as an opportunity to win the war, we are helping to extend the duration of the war and its cost in terms of destruction and lost human life and potential in Ukraine. The US and Ukraine will continue to discuss the lifting of restrictions on strikes against Russia, said John Kirby, a United States Navy Rear Admiral serving as the White House National Security Communications Advisor. But these things will not be publicly discussed, he emphasized. He said that Zelensky had repeatedly, both publicly and privately, asked for permission to hit more Russian military targets with weapons transferred by the US. It is clear why he is doing this, said Kirby. His country has been attacked. But as I have said many times, we will continue to talk to the Ukrainians, but we will do it privately. He added that, as of now, there are no changes in the policy of using American weapons by Ukraine. And that, of course, is significant, as this policy has been an enabling factor to the extraordinary aggression we have seen this week, unleashed by Moscow on the Ukrainian people on Monday and Tuesday. Explosions were also reported in Kharkiv, Odessa, Vinnytsia, Zaporizhia, Poltava, Dnipro, Khmelnytsky, Virovgrad, Kryvyi Rih, as well as Lviv, Rivne, and Ivano-Frankivsk oblasts. Ukraine's foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, said 15 of the country's 24 oblasts had been targeted during the attack, primarily targeting critical civilian infrastructure and our energy system. There have been civilian deaths and injuries, as well as the damage to the energy facilities, he said in a post on X, adding Russia continues to wage a cowardly war on civilians, which constitutes war crimes. The missile strike on the Kyiv Hydroelectric Power Plant in Vyshhorod caused damage to the plant, but apparently there were no breaches or breaks in the Kyiv dam. The Minister of Energy stated that because of the attacks, a wave of emergency power outages swept through Ukraine, connected both with preventative measures to maintain the power system's balance and integrity and with damage to the power equipment in many regions. A preliminary analysis of the combined projectile drone attack and the scale of weapons indicates that it was one of the largest attacks since the full-scale war began in 2022. The Center for Countering Disinformation of the National Security Council stressed that there is no danger to the Kyiv HPP dam. The HPP's capacity is 440 megawatts and enables the station to cover peak loads in the power system. Last week, Ukraine announced it would renew energy exports following lengthy repairs to its energy infrastructure. But of course, one of Moscow's aims is to increase energy dependence of Ukraine on its allies in the EU, not allow it to be energy independent. Shortly after 9 a.m. on the 26th, DTEK, Ukraine's largest private energy company, said that emergency power shutdowns were in place across Ukraine. The desire to destroy our energy sector will cost the Russians dearly. It will cost them their infrastructure, Ukraine's presidential office head, Andriy Yermak, said in a post on Telegram. Klitschko, the mayor of Kyiv, said there were power outages in several districts of the capital and later added that there were problems with the water supply on the right bank of the city. Ruslan Kravchenko, head of the Kyiv Regional Military Administration, said infrastructure facilities in Kyiv Oblast had been hit, adding that authorities were setting up points of invincibility, communal station points that provide mobile phone charging facilities and internet access for residents affected by power cuts. In Lviv Oblast, Governor Maxim Kazitsky said energy infrastructure had been attacked and power outages were in place as a result. Damage to infrastructure facilities were also reported in Zaporizhia and Vinnytsia oblasts. To conclude, Russia's attacks on Ukraine aren't just retaliation for Kursk. They cannot be classed as revenge. They are a strategy to crush Ukraine's will, economy, and energy infrastructure. Russia is a terrorist state. We need to respond and treat them as such, not accord them the status of a government or international geopolitical player. We need to finally close the skies over Ukraine and let Ukrainians destroy the launch sites and military bases on Russian territory from which these terror attacks are launched. In 1940 and 1941, the US didn't stop the UK from attacking targets in Nazi Germany, and nor should we place today absurd and nonsensical limitations on Ukraine's military strategy and its ability to defend itself and its people.